WFLA Now, this is Hey JB. Here's JB Biunno.
He will stay in handcuffs and shackles while he's in that cell. If he wants to sue me for violating his civil rights, so be it. He's not getting out of this jail again.
Vicky White now in a maximum security prison. Vicky White, her death ruled a suicide. We look now at their final moments as fugitives on the run from law enforcement. All of this coming to an end in Indiana, starting in Alabama, coming to an end in Indiana. We're going to discuss more on their plan to escape, the heroic efforts of law enforcement here live on WFLA Now. Good afternoon, folks. JB Biunno here with you live across all platforms on WFLA Now. Let's get right over to joining us from the road, NewsNation's Brian Entin. Great to have Brian, friend of the program, back here on the program. Brian, I know you're heading back right now into Alabama. A lot to discuss. Want to let everybody know, wherever you're watching from, you can use either of the two hashtags on your screen. Hashtag Hey Brian, hashtag Hey JB. We're going to pluck some of the questions and comments out of the Facebook Live comment section, YouTube Live as well. We'll look on Twitter if we can and try to get some of those comments and questions involved in the live stream. We want to hear from you and also answer any questions, because this is a story that a lot of folks were following really into, as far back as last week, over the course of the weekend. Of course, this now culminating with the capture of Vicky White and the death by suicide of Vicky White. Brian, just kind of update us with what the latest is and what you're working on as we start to get into some of the questions from our audience members here.
Yeah, so the latest is Vicky White is now back in Alabama. Late last night, they brought him back. He was arraigned in Florence, Alabama at the Lauderdale County Courthouse. They had the judge come in. It was at about 9:50 Central Time, I think, is when it happened. The judge came in just to do the arraignment. They brought him in to the courthouse, did it, and then they took him out. I'm sure you've seen the video by now. I mean, it was so interesting to see. Oh, you're showing it right now. I mean, he's like this massive man, and we've been following him for the last, we're trying to follow him for the last 12 days, and we kept hearing he's almost 7 feet tall. But when you see him like that, I mean, you realize that he just is so much even taller than all of the deputies. So this really big guy, they arraigned him, and he was originally, we were told that he was going to go back to the county jail that he got out of initially before being sent to a state prison, but they changed that plan, which is probably a good idea, and they took him straight to a maximum security prison in Jefferson County, Alabama. I was actually just reading about this prison on our drive. It's like the place where the most dangerous of the dangerous go in Alabama. So it seems like he's in the place where he should be right now.
Interesting to note some of the things that were found with them, Brian. Talking about $20,000 in cash. We'll talk more about the cash and why there's only $20,000 in just a moment. But an AR-15 rifle, 4 semi-automatic handguns, and then wigs for disguises were recovered as well. But this is by what we're hearing from Vicky White and his conversations reportedly to law enforcement, this was going to be a firefight. This was going to be a standoff that was going to ensue between Vicky White, and law enforcement, had it not been for the heroic efforts with a pit maneuver to end this police chase and bring this to an end. What do we know about the heroic efforts of law enforcement here?
Yeah, basically, the sheriff in Indiana, in Evansville, says that Vicky White told them after he was brought in that he wanted this to end essentially suicide by cop. He wanted there to be, a gunfight. Luckily, that didn't happen. They had been doing surveillance. They were at this motel. We were actually there all last night at this motel they were staying at. It's actually right across the street from the sheriff's office, which is really interesting, where they were hiding out at the motel. So they were doing surveillance on them at the motel. And they were trying to figure out, were they going to storm the room? How are they going to handle this? And that's when Vicky and Vicky left. So they started following and pursuing them, did the pit maneuver, and luckily they ended this without anyone on the outside getting hurt. Of course, we know Vicky White committed suicide before the crash, but it could have been much more dangerous. And you mentioned everything they had in the car, all of that cash and the guns and even her taser that she had from working at the sheriff's office in Alabama, they had with them. But we also learned late last night that they also had a lot of camping gear, which I thought was really interesting. And the sheriff in Indiana told us that he thinks that they were leaving that hotel for good, that they were on to their next spot to hide out. So it's certainly very good that they stopped them when they did, or they may have been, able to get away and continue this trip that they were on.
For folks just joining us, you can use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyBrian. We're about to get to some of your questions and comments. Brian's on the road, so hopefully we have good cell signal there as he now gets back into the state of Alabama. We had talked about it on a previous stream that there were so many questions about whether or not the two were going to flee to Mexico or flee to Canada, trying to get out internationally. And I tried to tell folks that it's not that easy just crossing over the border and just making it to another country like that. But yes, that apparently we are hearing reportedly that the plans were for them to hide out, kind of lay low a little bit and wait for things to cool off as far as all of the law enforcement presence that were in these states trying to track them down. Brian, I want to, before we get to some of the questions and comments that are coming with the hashtags, what I want to do is ask you this one question, because this is something that people have been talking about and asking questions about and speculating about online. How this has been reported as a jailhouse romance, about how this was able to happen, how a relatively high-ranking official within the Department of Corrections in Alabama is able to be, as we understand it, be wooed by an inmate who is, by all indications, a really bad guy, someone who is accused of doing some extremely terrible things, and how somebody with such an incredible track record could, if this all adds up, falls in love with somebody who is such a career baddie, if you will. What have we learned in recent days about what made Vicky White put everything on the line to break this man out of jail and go on the run with him, and whether or not there really was a romance, or was it one-sided? Did Casey White feel, I think that we know now that he did not feel much remorse for Vicky when she died. That's what we're hearing, obviously, as well here. But what do we know about the romance that existed between these two?
So that's a really, really good question. And I think that's why there's so much fascination in the case, is what would cause Vicky White to do this, to upend her life. She was a law enforcement officer for almost 2 decades. She was well respected. She was second in command in the jail. What would cause someone like that to betray all of her coworkers and her family and do this? And we still don't have the answer to that. And I think that's why so many people wanted Vicky to survive, because we wanted to be able to find out some of those things and figure out what was going on with her, which we may never have those answers. In terms of, was this one-sided, was this a two-sided romance? All indications are, and this is what the sheriff has been saying, that this was two-sided, that this was a love affair happening inside the jail. And she was very, very much a part of it and aware and knew exactly what she was doing, and planned it out meticulously before. Last week, beginning of the week, we were in Alabama going to all the different little places that she had been while she was planning all of this. We went where she bought the first getaway SUV. She'd been at Kohl's buying men's clothing. She was at the adult store buying items, that she wanted to have for when they were together. And she, this was all meticulously planned. She sold her house days before they took off, and then went to several banks to get the $90,000 in cash. So I don't think there's any doubt that she was in on it. I don't think she was forced, and that's what the sheriff has said too. In terms of why she would do this and betray her whole family and all of her coworkers, we may just never really know. He's talking, which is interesting. He's cooperating with police. He's talking to detectives, so he's obviously giving his side of things. But we'll never really know what was going on in Vicky's mind. And
how much can you trust the word of Casey White at this stage? At this point, he probably doesn't have very much to lose. He could be facing the death penalty upon conviction for that stabbing death many years ago. But again, how much faith can you put in the word from somebody who has done the things that he is accused of doing and then breaking out? Again, live here with Brian Entin for a few more minutes. Let's start to get into some of the questions and comments that we have coming in. Michelle Batten wants to know, hashtag HJB, what charges will Casey face? I would imagine, Brian, that there's going to be the filing of charges now in addition to the charges that he was already facing while in jail.
Yeah, so the new charge he's facing, like an escape charge. That's the one that he was arraigned for last night, late at night at the courthouse. And then he's still facing the murder charge that he was supposed to be going to trial for. So I'm assuming all of that will still continue.
This question coming in, let's get to this one. Sarah Hart on YouTube, hashtag Hey Brian. Is James getting the reward money? He is also the hero.
So yeah, this is like another, really popular question that I keep getting. I mean, I love James. He's incredible. I'm like so fortunate to have got to meet him and spend a lot of time with him in the last 24 hours. We don't know. I mean, I asked at the press conference yesterday and they sort of, skirted around the question. I guess they're going to have to look into it. So I don't know. I just talked to James on the phone. We just called him in the car like 20 minutes ago to sort of check on him. And he doesn't, I mean, of course, he would like the money, obviously. I mean, who wouldn't? But he's not in it for the money. I mean, every time I talk to him about it, he's just like, oh, I didn't do it for the money. He's kind of uncomfortable that he's become a hero now because, he's not used to that. He was just telling us that someone drove from Cincinnati this morning to his car wash in Evansville just to meet him and take a picture with him because every morning he's out there like sweeping the car wash and emptying the trash. And while he was doing that, this guy showed up from Cincinnati, which he thought was really, really nice. But again, he's just not used to it. His family's been seeing all the social media comments, and I think it's just kind of overwhelming for them. But sorry, long story short, we still don't know if he's going to get the reward. But that's definitely something we're going to stay on top of.
And if you think you don't have a voice on social media when it comes to these types of things, you're completely wrong. You start to see social media traction, and you'll start to see some of those types of questions get asked at press conferences and in various interviews. So don't think that your voice doesn't matter when it comes to matters like this, because if you really do feel that James does deserve the reward money, I think that social media can rally behind that cause if they think that that is a cause worth rallying behind. Let's get to another question from hello to our YouTube audience, our growing YouTube audience. Brian Entin, JB Biunno here with you live on WFLA. Now, Daisy on YouTube, hashtag Hey Brian, who was driving?
So that's a good question because there was conflicting reports in the beginning. One sheriff was saying that Vicky was driving and one was saying that Casey was driving. The latest from the U.S. Marshals who were there is that Casey was driving.
Let's get to this one from Faye Hawkins, hashtag HJB, from the 911 call. And let me actually bring this up really quickly, folks. If you want to hear the full 911 call, you can click on the link in the description on this video. It'll take you over to WFLA.com, the WFLA app, and you can listen to the 7+ minutes of the 911 call that Vicky White made before the crash. We were going to play some of it here, but we're trying to get to as many questions as possible while we have Brian Entin and while we have good cell signal with Brian Entin holding up extremely well. But Faye Hawkins saying, hashtag KJB, from the 911 call, you could hear her telling him to stop and that they could run. Why did we not hear the gunshot fire off in that call is the question from Faye Hawkins.
Yeah, that's a good question, too. There's a lot of mystery around that 911 call. Like who actually dialed in? Was it the OnStar from the Cadillac they were in? We're still not really sure. Because it's like weird, like they're not actually talking to 911, but you can hear everything happening in the car. I'm not sure why we didn't hear the gunshot. I mean, it's really muffled in some parts. You hear a lot of weird noises. I think you hear like the airbags going off at one point. So it's possible like it was just in one of those muffled parts and we didn't hear it. But yeah, I think the 911 call led to more questions than answers because it's just a weird call to listen to. But it was. For me, having covered this for 12 days, like it was like kind of just interesting to hear Vicky's voice. I had never heard her voice before. And to hear her say, I don't have the quotes right in front of me, but basically like we should have stayed at the hotel, get out and run. Again, what I was saying earlier, people saying she was actively very much, a part of this. I mean, you can kind of hear that in the 911 call.
We spotlighted one of your tweets, Brian, in I think our very first live stream on this when you said that you had spoken to a jail guard who indicated to you that Vicky was smart and was a calculated person. But there's also there's been a lot of interesting conversation that I've been catching up on online on Twitter about how well coordinated this plan of escape really was and whether or not it was faulty or whether or not it was a sound plan that just took twists and turns. Are you getting more of the sense that this was a highly coordinated plan that just kind of took those unexpected twists and turns, or that that maybe Vicky White and maybe the plan to escape wasn't as highly coordinated as originally suspected?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we thought it was highly coordinated in some ways, the way she sold the house and got the cash and had the first getaway car ready to go. I think in other ways, now we're realizing there were things they weren't that smart about. Like, why did they stay in Evansville for so long? Why did they get the motel right near the sheriff's office? Why did they left one truck, the whole car wash part of it, they left the pickup truck there under the bay and then got into the Cadillac right there. But there were all those surveillance cameras there, and there were people around. So, there are definitely parts of it that they weren't as smart about, which is obviously why they got caught.
Last question, then we got to wrap up because I know Brian's got to get going. Kelly Lang, #KGB, #KBrian. Is he in solitary confinement? Do we know this?
We don't know, but I think based on what I've been reading about the prison, I think he is, because it's solitary cells there. It's not like they keep inmates together or anything like that. But no, we don't know for sure. I would assume so, though. We're
gonna turn our attention now to another story in just a moment. But before we do, Brian, I'm speaking for myself, and I'm also speaking for a lot of folks that follow you. And I know how difficult it can be to cover stories, especially when you're spanning multiple states. So this is just a Brian Entin pal-to-pal wellness check on how you're doing. Did you have a nutritious breakfast this morning? How are you doing on the road? Are you sleeping okay at night? How are you doing out there, pal?
I'm doing well. Luckily, I've got my buddies here and my folks who help me out. We've got Lauren in the back. Is it okay if I show you, Lauren? And then Luis is here driving. So we're doing okay. Obviously we've been doing this, we've been chasing them for 12 days, so we're a little tired. We just got Panera for lunch. So we're about to get back on the road, but yeah, we're doing fine. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but we're fine. I've been thinking more about, the family of of Casey White's victim, like what they must be going through during all of this. And even Vicky White's mom, she's been on my mind a lot because we met her at the beginning of last week. And obviously, regardless of what you think of Vicky White, you have to feel for her and what her family must be going through in terms of Vicky's mom. So anyway, yeah, we're doing okay.